The people who will cost you the most in this life will never announce themselves as threats. They will arrive at your door with food, call you by your name, and tell you they only want what is best for you. Nobody warned you about this because the warning sounds like betrayal, and they taught you that questioning the family is the one sin that cannot be forgiven. Niccolo Machiavelli spent his entire career inside the most dangerous courts in human history, watching power transfer, collapse, and get destroyed, and what he documented was not what enemies do to powerful men, but what the people closest to them do. He wrote rules so precise and so threatening that the institutions of his era banned them publicly and studied them privately. What he understood about family, loyalty, and the hidden architecture of control is what most men spend their entire lives learning too late. Today, that changes. The people who limit you the most are not the ones who openly oppose you. They are the ones who smile at you across the dinner table, use your childhood name, and genuinely believe that what they are doing to your ambition is protection. You have felt this your entire life, and you have never been able to name it cleanly, because the moment you try to name it, the guilt arrives before the sentence is finished, and the guilt was installed by the same system that is currently holding you in place. That is not coincidence. That is architecture. Every family is a system before it is a relationship, and every system has one biological imperative that supersedes love, supersedes loyalty, and supersedes the genuine affection that may exist between the people inside it, and that imperative is survival, specifically the survival of the current arrangement, the current balance of roles, the current story the family tells about itself and every person inside it. You were assigned a role in that story before you were old enough to audition for it, and the role came with a ceiling, and the ceiling was not placed there out of malice. It was placed there because the system required it, because a system that allows one member to ascend without limit destabilizes the equilibrium that every other member has organized their identity around. When you begin to exceed that ceiling, when your income grows beyond what the family expected, when your thinking evolves past the ideology they raised you in, when your ambition begins to take a shape that does not fit the chapter they wrote for you, the system does not celebrate the disruption, it corrects it, and the correction comes dressed in the most disarming language available to the human species. It comes dressed as concern. Machiavelli spent his career embedded in the courts of Renaissance Florence, watching the most powerful families in Europe manage, manipulate, and systematically destroy their own members when those members grew beyond what the family structure required them to be. And what he documented was not the cruelty of evil people. It was the automatic, self-preserving intelligence of human systems, operating exactly as human systems are designed to operate. He did not moralize about what he saw. He did not prescribe remedies. He did not comfort the men being consumed by the systems they were born into. He simply described the mechanics with the cold precision of a surgeon, describing an anatomy, because he understood that the man who sees the mechanism clearly is the only man with any chance of surviving it. He wrote that men are not governed primarily by love or loyalty in the abstract. They are governed by interest, by the preservation of what they have, by the protection of the position they occupy and the story they need to believe about themselves to maintain it. And the most threatening thing you can do to a person who has accepted a limited life is to refuse to accept the same limitation in their presence. Your success is not neutral to the people around you who settled. It is a mirror, and the reflection is unbearable, and the unbearable reflection will be managed not through honest confrontation, but through the quiet, persistent erosion of your belief in what you are building. Here is how it operates in the daily reality of your life. Not in theory, but in the specific texture of interactions you have been navigating for years without the language to describe what was actually happening. You make a significant decision, a business, an investment, a departure from the expected path, and you bring it to the family because they are your family, because you were taught that family is your foundation, because the mythology of unconditional support is so deeply installed in you that the act of sharing feels like the natural and correct thing to do. Within 24 hours, the first concern arrives. Framed carefully, delivered warmly, wrapped in precisely the language that makes it impossible to reject without appearing defensive, and you register something uncomfortable in your chest, but you cannot name it as opposition because it sounds so much like love. Within a week, the concern has traveled, has been discussed in conversations you were not part of, has gathered the collective weight of the family's shared anxiety about disruption, and has returned to you not as one person's hesitation, but as a unified position. And you are now not having a conversation with your family. You are facing a consensus that formed without you, using information you provided, arriving at a conclusion that was probably inevitable from the moment you opened your mouth. The question you need to sit with is not whether their concern is genuine. The question is what their concern is actually protecting, because it is not protecting your future. It is protecting the arrangement that requires your future to remain predictable, manageable, and safely within the boundaries of what the system has already accounted for. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, a man so ruthlessly accurate about human psychology that his contemporaries called him a misanthrope rather than confront what he was describing, spent decades documenting the invisible war between exceptional individuals and the mediocre environments that surround them, and he identified something that should permanently change how you interpret the resistance you have been experiencing. He wrote that the display of superior ability in the presence of mediocrity does not produce admiration. It produces a specific visceral discomfort that the mediocre person cannot consciously acknowledge, because acknowledging it would require them to confront the disparity between what you are building and what they accepted, and the ego will dismantle a person's entire logic before it accepts that level of self-examination. So instead of confronting the discomfort directly, the system routes it through available channels: concern, skepticism, historical references to your past failures, questions about your judgment, and every single one of those channels is genuine in its emotional delivery while being structurally opposed to your expansion, which is precisely why it is so difficult to defend against and so exhausting to navigate. The opposition you have been fighting is not cynical, it is sincere. And the sincerity of it is what makes it so effective, because you cannot dismiss sincere opposition from people you love without the guilt mechanism engaging immediately, and the guilt mechanism was installed by the same people whose sincere opposition you are trying to dismiss. History is not abstract on this point. History is a detailed record of what happens to men who assume that shared blood provides immunity from the dynamics of human self-interest, and the record is consistent across centuries with a precision that should alarm you. Joseph, whose story is documented in one of the oldest texts in human civilization, was not destroyed by strangers or undermined by competitors. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, men who shared his blood, his childhood, his parents, his table, and his God, and the mechanism that drove them was not hatred in its pure form, but the specific, unbearable psychological pressure of watching one member of the system receive elevation that the rest had not been assigned. They did not sell him because he wronged them. They sold him because his elevation made their ordinariness visible, and the human ego, operating below the level of conscious morality, resolved the unbearable imbalance, not by elevating itself, but by eliminating the source of the comparison. He spent years in a foreign prison for the crime of being exceptional in an environment that required him to be ordinary, and the men who put him there did not understand what they had done to themselves, because the man they tried to contain became, through the very suffering they imposed on him, something so far beyond their containment that their original act of suppression became the mechanism of his ascension. That pattern has repeated in every culture, every era, every family structure that has ever existed, which means it is not a historical curiosity, it is a feature of human psychology, operating beneath conscious choice, and understanding it does not make you cynical, it makes you competent. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who commanded the most powerful empire on earth, while managing a court full of people who wanted what he had, did not write about his inner life for public consumption. He wrote in private, in a journal never intended for anyone else's eyes, and what he wrote about the people in his most intimate circle was the practiced discipline of a man who had decided to stop being surprised by what human beings do when their interests are at stake. He wrote that when he woke each morning, he prepared himself to encounter the ungrateful, the deceitful, the envious, and the arrogant, and he was not writing about strangers, he was writing about the people inside the palace, the people at the table, and his practice was not to hate them for being human, but to stop constructing a fantasy about human nature that their behavior would inevitably destroy. The man who expects his family to operate outside of human psychology has built his entire strategy on a foundation that reality will eventually collapse, and the collapse always happens at the worst possible moment, when the stakes are highest and the decision is most critical, because those are precisely the moments when the system applies maximum pressure to return you to your assigned position. There is a psychological trap that operates so quietly inside family dynamics that most men carry it for decades without identifying it, and it is responsible for more derailed ambitions than any external opposition could ever produce. You are in a moment of genuine vulnerability. The business is struggling, the timeline has shifted, the confidence that felt solid last month is flickering, and you are sitting with a family member who loves you, and the room feels safe, and you say something honest about the uncertainty of what you are building. They hold it with care, they respond with warmth, and you feel the relief of having named the weight to someone who received it with love, and then you return to the work, and the work progresses, and the doubt you expressed gets resolved by the execution that follows it. But the confession does not get resolved. The confession lives in that person permanently, filed in the category of evidence about who you are and what you are capable of, and the next time the family system requires a reason to question your direction, the filing cabinet opens, and the thing you said in your most vulnerable moment becomes the most convincing argument against your most ambitious vision. They will not deploy it maliciously, they will deploy it with complete sincerity, because they genuinely remember you saying it, and genuinely believe they are protecting you from repeating a pattern you yourself identified, and the protection feels like love in their body, even as it functions as a cage around your expansion. Machiavelli's instruction on this was absolute. The prince does not share his